Hello and welcome to a new video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my top 100 Amazon KDP publishing tips to help you increase your book sales. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name is Chris and I've been publishing online through Amazon for over 10 years now, and I created this channel to share my experience that I've gained over those years to help people get on track with a successful publishing business. Okay, so let's get straight into this video. Here are my 100 quickfire tips. Now, you want to make sure that you stick around because every gold colored tip will be something special. It could be some crazy niche. It could be access to my course for free, which is my beginner's course. It could be a free video review of your book catalog. There's going to be some random ones in there, so you want to make sure that you stick around until the end. And also, let's talk. If you have any publishing tips that you want to add to this list, make sure that you leave them below in the comments section. Now, keep in mind that I'm only going to be replying to comments the first 2 hours that this video is released. So if you've got something to say and you want me to read it, make sure you leave those comments as soon as possible. Okay, let's go. Okay, so tip number 1, which is going to be a golden tip, and this is a kind of niche reveal, this tip here, and that is to get yourself into early education books. Now, this niche is absolutely huge. It's bigger than coloring books, it's bigger than activity books. It's one of the biggest niches that you can possibly get into. There's lots of different areas that you can cover in this niche as well, and if you can create books in this niche, I highly recommend that you check it out. Okay, so tip number 2 is to avoid no content books. So I'm talking about things like notebooks and line journals. The competition for these are absolutely incredible. Your book is probably going to get lost as soon as you upload it, and you're going to bang your head against that no content book wall, and you're probably never going to make any significant sales. So what I would do here is focus on books where you can get a bit more creative, where there's more room for you to fit into the marketplace. So low content books, medium content books like coloring books and activity books, and then higher content books, of course, are a great way to make sales through KDP. Okay, so tip number 3 is to stop being obsessed with the number of search results here. So yes, that can determine how much competition there is for your niche. However, you'll find that this number is kind of all over the place sometimes and doesn't really make sense. So the way that I like to do it is to see how fast the exact competition for the type of book that I'm creating dies off the first 2 pages. So for example, if we have a maths workbook for 3rd graders, then what I'd want to do is scroll through the first 2 pages here and then just take a look at how fast the exact competition, so that's math workbooks for grade 3, how fast that dies off the very first few pages. Okay, so if I saw that these next few pages were completely chock-a-block with maths workbook for 3rd graders, then I'd probably avoid that niche. But if I saw that it stopped after the 2nd page, for example, then I'd think to myself, this is probably a good opportunity to enter into this niche. Okay, so tip number 4 is to check out the Self-Publishing Titan's new tools. I believe in the last few days, they've created a few free tools that you can use for your publishing business. So things like sales calculators, royalty calculators, and things like that. So I'm going to leave a link in the description for you to check these out. No harm in checking it out because it's absolutely free and might help you with your publishing. Tip number 5 is to always try and add value to your books. It will make a huge difference. Look at what other people in your niche are offering and then try and find a way to offer something better. Even if it's just something as simple as adding more pages, it will still help to give you an edge over your competition. And that might be the deciding factor when it comes to a customer purchasing your book ahead of someone else's. Tip number 6 is to use CreativeFabrica's font section. Now, I don't ever recommend using their KDP interior section. However, the font section that they have is fantastic. There are lots and lots of different fonts that you can pick from here, and having a great font on your front cover can be a difference between making sales and not making sales. So if you're interested in that, you can get the first month on CreativeFabrica for $1. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in that. Tip number 7, don't use BSR calculators as the deciding factor for your niche selection. Take them with a pinch of salt and do most of your research on Amazon itself. The more research that you do on Amazon yourself, the more you'll get an understanding of how much competition there actually is in the exact niche that you're targeting, and you'll get a better idea of what to actually produce in that niche as well. Tip number 8, don't use ads to try and make a direct profit. Use them to boost your book up the rankings and then cut them off once they get there. Making direct profit from ads is hard, But as long as you're close enough to the break-even point, then that is still good. Amazon loves it when your book is getting sales, no matter where those sales are coming from, and that is going to boost your book up the rankings so that you can get found easier organically. Tip number 9 is to find your own niches. This is easy, it hardly takes any time, and you'll get a better understanding of your audience by doing your own research. Tip number 10, don't be afraid to use software to help you create your book. Note, I said help and not rely on. There is no software on the planet that will automatically make sales for you. However, there are just some things that you can't do yourself and you can't outsource. So that's where software becomes important in certain niches. Tip 11, speaking of outsourcing, make sure that you always check the content that your freelancer is sending you. There are lots of people on Fiverr and Upwork who will try and rip you off. You can just search Google for something like reverse image search and use Duper Checker, or search Google for something like plagiarism check and go from there. Use as many different softwares as you can and websites as you can to make sure that your content that you get back from your freelancer doesn't exist elsewhere on the internet. Tip number 12, capitalize the first letters in your book titles on your listing. It looks cleaner. Tip number 13, do not wait until the last few moments to cash in on Q4 sales. If you have an idea for a book that you think is going to sell well during Q4, get it ready now. Do not wait. Tip number 14 is to go where buyer traffic is going. Even if you think the niche is completely saturated, there is usually room for more if you know how to position yourself well within that niche. Think of it this way, if you have a niche like coloring book for adults, that may be way too competitive, which it is. But something like butterfly coloring book for seniors is kind of a branch off of that broad niche to something a little bit more specific, but remains within that niche, and that might have less competition but still be selling well. Another example here would be something like coloring book for short-sighted adults, which again remains in that broad niche but targets a different section of people within that niche. Tip 15 is to take inspiration from the best-selling books in your niche. So I'm saying inspiration, not copying. It is important to make sure that your book is in theme with what is selling well, because that's what customers are attracted to. There's nothing wrong with taking inspirations from the best-selling books, because you want to implement some of those design choices into yours to increase your chances of making sales as well. Tip number 16 is to spell check everything. Your main audience is going to be people that speak English, and bad English will put people off of buying your books. So if your grammar is bad, or if you're not a native English speaker, find a way to make sure that it is spot on. Tip number 17, do you like writing stories? If so, check out the possibilities when it comes to creating short stories for adults and seniors. People want short stories, and if you're capable of writing, you can easily create a lot of these. Tip number 18, don't try and create books that you think will sell. Create books around what is proven to be selling already on the Amazon marketplace. Do your niche research correctly and look at the BSRs for books in that niche to make sure that they are consistently low, and that way you'll know that there is definitely lots of buyer traffic going to them. Tip number 19, take a break from publishing. There's absolutely no rush, and sometimes a break is all we need to get inspired, because KDP burnout is real, and when you bang your head against that publishing wall, the quality of your book is going to become worse and worse, and therefore the amount of sales that you make is going to be less and less. Publishing through Amazon isn't going anywhere. Tip number 20 is to spread yourself across a variety of book types and niches. So don't just focus on low content books. Take a look at medium content books like activity books and coloring books, and even take a look at branching out into higher content books. Higher quality, high content books sell extremely well if you get it right. Don't limit yourself to just a few ideas, because you'll never know what area of publishing you actually excel in. Tip number 21, if you can't create a suitable book cover for the niche that you're in, outsource it to someone that can. Tip 21 and a half is to use Fiverr.com, but don't pay the bare minimum. Check out what the more expensive gigs have to offer, because typically they are much better. Tip number 22 is to stop listening to anyone that tells you that KDP or making money online is dead in 2022, etc., etc. The opportunity will always be there. We might have to adjust to certain changes, but the chances to make sales will always be there, I promise you. Tip number 23 is to not get disheartened by other people's results. Some people can make huge money with KDP. Some people can make no money at all. Some people lie about their success. Who cares? We all know by now that you can make money with KDP. You just don't know what other people are doing with their publishing business, how long they've been publishing for, how much effort they put into it, who they've been taking advice from. This is your journey. You're going to be absolutely fine. Tip number 24 is to try and make each book that you create 5% better than the last. It doesn't seem like a lot, but over time you're going to end up creating some incredible books if you go into it with this mentality. So that 5% can come in many different forms. So it could be just a simple case of creating a better book cover, running better keywords to your ad campaigns, writing a better description, doing your niche research for a bit longer. Tip number 25, and this is a golden tip, not really a tip, but the first 3 people that comment A+ content, God will get access to my personal outsourcer who creates the best converting A+ content that I've ever seen. So first come, first served, and these are at reasonable prices as well. Tip number 26 is to stop obsessing with those 7 back-end keyword slots. They aren't as important as you think they are. Fill them with relevant keywords and you're good to go. Tip number 27 is to go through the reviews of your competitors' books. You're getting real feedback here from what customers in your niche like and don't like. Take that information and then implement it into your books. It's that simple. Tip number 28 is to not believe the low content book hype. You can make money with low content books, but most people do not make great money with low content books. And if they do, they've either been plugging away at it for years or they've gotten lucky or a combination of both. However, if you do create a good, unique book inside a good niche, then you can definitely make sales. However, I definitely recommend that you look at other areas of publishing and not just low content books. Tip number 29, if you're going to commit to publishing, then really commit to it. Give this at least 6 months before calling it quits or moving on to a new project. There's never been a get rich quick scheme online, and Amazon KDP is definitely not one of them either. Tip number 30 is to not let YouTube videos influence your publishing decisions too much, including my own videos. No one really cares that much about your publishing business and your success. And fear mongering and hype is all part of the YouTube game. People will pretty much tell you almost anything to get views. So you need to take what makes sense to you and then go it alone. This is your journey, and taking advice religiously from one person who doesn't have your best interest at heart is a path to failure. Tip number 32, stop convincing yourself that your book is perfect before you upload it. There is pretty much always something that you can improve on before you upload your book. Tip number 33, branch out into audiobooks. Audiobooks are pretty hot right now. The platform is called ACX if you want to get started with that. Tip 34, speaking of audiobooks, if you can't afford to have someone narrate your book, you have the option through ACX to do a royalty share with the narrator, allowing you to basically get into audiobooks for free. But keep in mind, you're splitting any royalties that you make with that book with the person that narrates it for a long, long time. Tip number 35, if you're outsourcing a book cover, never settle for the first effort that your freelancer comes back with. Make them adjust the cover until you're happy with it and it fits what people are attracted to in your niche. Take a look at the process between my football activity book covers here. Take a look at the first attempt and then take a look at the 5th attempt and tell me that there's not a huge difference between the two. Tip number 36 is to subscribe to me and hit the notification bell because I have some extremely exciting videos coming up next month. Tip 37 is to stop following channels that promise certain income through KDP. Those are usually those dumb side hustle channels that show you how to make $5,000 a month with BookBolt. You'll find out the hard way that there are no guarantees in the KDP business and you'll end up getting demoralized and quitting. Tip number 38 is a bit of a weird one, but check your monitor is accurately reproducing colors. This is important when creating book covers because you want to make sure that you get the colors right for the niche that you're in. I actually had my monitor set to a film mode and the colors were really off and I ended up creating a book that looked radioactive. Tip number 39, now this is another weird one, but if you're unsure if there's something about your book cover that's off, you know that feeling where you're looking at it but you can't quite work out what's wrong with it, take a break from staring at it. Get up, get off your computer, walk away from it and then walk back to it, and the first thing that you notice will be the thing that isn't quite right. Tip number 40 is to always check for trademarks before creating and uploading a book. No matter what the book is, always check it. Just head to Google and type something like trademark check and you'll probably end up on USPTO sco.gov, which is a website where you can check to see if the terms that you're using have been trademarked or not. Tip 40 and a half regarding trademarks here. Just because you see a trademark exist, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's trademarked for books. So the class that you're looking for, like you can see here, is primary class would be 16, which is for usage on paper material, I believe, i.e. books. Tip number 41 is to download a BSR Chrome extension like DS Amazon Quick View. You'll be able to take a look at the book's BSRs much quicker, thus making your niche research much easier and faster. It does save a lot of time, I promise you. Tip number 42 is to make sure the text on your book cover is centered correctly before uploading it. Tip number 43, make sure there is no spelling errors on your book cover. This is the biggest KDP sin of all time. Tip number 44, if you're outsourcing, do not let freelancers take advantage of you. You're here to make that money back, but at the same time, don't be tight with how much money you'll spend, because you'll end up attracting scammers and low quality workers. Tip number 45, and it is a golden tip. Have you ever thought about looking into color by number books? That's an interesting one, check it out. Tip number 46 is to try and find niches that aren't too broad, where you can't compete, but aren't too niche down to the point where they don't have any buyer traffic going to them. Think of it like this: activity book, too broad. Football activity book, better, but still too broad. Football activity book for kids 9 to 12, perfect. Football activity book for kids 9 to 12 who support Man United, way too specific. Tip number 47 is to just accept that a lot of your books won't make sales. Cement that into your brain. Take as much emotion and attachment as you can out of publishing and move forward like a robot. Tip number 48 is to be careful with your ad spend during Q4. This can get out of hand during those months, so make sure that you monitor it correctly. Tip number 49, with seasonal niches, you don't necessarily have to target the season itself. For example, Christmas coloring book. Instead of that, why not take the time to create an absolutely stunning dragon coloring book for adults, for example, and that is bound to be something that someone is going to buy for someone as a gift during Q4, but it's also going to be something that has the potential to sell all year round. But if you have the time, you have the money, you can definitely do both. Tip number 50 is to run multiple versions of the same ad campaign. Sometimes you create an ad campaign, it won't make you any clicks or impressions, but then you can go ahead and create the exact same campaign and it will start getting those clicks and impressions. It works in a strange way sometimes. So for me, it's always best to have more than one campaign going, even if it is exactly the same. Tip number 51 is a general tip here, but that is to stop moving from one shiny object to the next with your online businesses. KDP works just amazingly well and there's nothing else like it out there. Tip number 52, to reiterate, avoid side hustle channels that make you great promises of stupid income claims. These channels know literally nothing about publishing and they just want your money. Tip number 53 is to not get disheartened if you're having a bad month. Your KDP business isn't dying, it's just the way that it flows sometimes. I'm having a bad month with KDP myself and I really don't care. Tip number 54, KDP has finally defined what a low content book is and now makes you click that little low content book button before you submit your book for review. So make sure that you know if your book falls into their official low content book category before uploading. Tip number 55 is a golden tip. Now, it's not a tip again, obviously, but if you say free book review in the comments below, the first 2 people to do this will get a free 30-minute video review of your book catalog. Tip number 56 is to use your main keyword as the title of your book. Don't overthink this. Use the main keyword, the one that you know has got traffic going to it. Use that as the title of your book. Tip number 57 is to use a color picker tool to accurately find colors of your competitors' books that you like. I use one called Colorzilla, but there are plenty of Chrome extensions out there that you can use. Tip number 58 is to use bookowl.com to quickly find the dimensions you need for your book cover template. Tip 59, if you're less than 3 months into KDP and you're not seeing sales, don't give up. This is very, very normal. Tip number 60 is when you're searching for niches, always check to see if people are looking for large font versions. A lot of people have difficulty reading, so they need that larger font. They need that larger font in the books that they buy. Tip number 61 is to pray to Lord Bezos each morning for additional sales. Tip 62 is to make sure to have ebook and hardback versions of your books where it makes sense to, if they are suitable for your niches as well. You'll get more sales and you get found from different angles this way too. Tip 63, if spending or losing money on ad campaigns makes you feel upset or anxious, then you need to stop running ad campaigns until you can afford to do so. Tip 64, when outsourcing parts of your work, put out more than one job offering, especially when using Upwork.com. Tip 65, speaking of outsourcing, always ask your freelancer for a very specific test order before hiring them. This is to make sure that what you're getting from them is going to be legit, and also check to see how many reviews they have before you hire them. Tip 66 is to stop fretting about acquiring reviews for your books. If you have a good book in a good niche and you get eyes on that book, you will make sales and you will get 5-star reviews over time. Tip 67 is to spend less time in Facebook groups and in the YouTube comments and more time working on your books. Tip 68, if you're not sure which keywords to use as the title of your book, since they're the most important, then you can use something like Helium 10 to take a look and see what keywords actually have traffic going to them. You can use the free version of Helium 10 to get about 3 searches a day, so make sure you use them wisely. Tip number 69 is to always include keywords in your subtitle, but what you want to do with your subtitle is to make sure that it reads well and also gives a benefit to the person that's potentially buying that book, as well as having some keywords in there as well. Tip number 70, if you're doing low content books, if it makes sense to do so, then add a swear word onto your front cover. People love that, and if it makes sense within your niche, then you're definitely going to increase your chances of making sales toward the right audience. Tip number 71, don't use author names to try and rank your books better, i.e. Mr. Notebook Dude. Just pick a random name, make sure it's not someone famous or anything trademarked, and just use that. Tip number 72 is a golden tip. So if you want to say free course in the comments and you'll get access to my course, my beginner's course, for free. This is for the first 5 people only, and then that is it. Tip number 73, regarding courses, don't be afraid to buy someone's course that you trust. While you don't need a course, it's worth the money if it gives you a set direction to follow, minimalizing the guesswork. I haven't seen many, but I suspect that maybe our friend, the Life Graduate, has a very good Udemy course for a very cheap price. Tip 74 is to stop listening to the comment gurus who want to bring everyone else down with them. They suck, they're clueless, and they're typically full of hate. Tip 75 is to follow all the channels that you can, the ones that make sense to you, but understand ultimately you're going to have to go your own direction. What has worked for someone else may not be best suited for you. So YouTube channels, including mine, pinch of salt. Tip number 76 is to avoid people that are trying to sell you unbelievably high priced courses. There's a wealth of information out there and you don't need to spend $4,900 on a course. There are some fantastic courses on Udemy that you can check out for around $20 that will have just as good information in them. And plus YouTube channels, you don't need to spend that much money. Tip number 77 is to be careful using pre-made interiors or even buying pre-made interiors and then altering them slightly. Not because it just seems kind of fishy, but also because it promotes laziness in your work, and typically your books will end up looking weird if you get them from multiple sources. People love it when you have that kind of uniform feel going to it for your book, so in my opinion, always make sure that you're getting everything from the same person or same source, whether that be an outsourcer or whether you're actually designing the book yourself. Tip number 78, if you're publishing a book in a new niche and you start seeing sales in that niche quickly, make sure that you double down, triple down on that niche as soon as possible. Tip number 79 is to focus on your quality over your quantity. That's what they say, but what does that even mean? Who knows? I say focus on what your customer wants from the niche that you're entering and deliver it to them in your book. Give them what they need, make them happy. That's what quality is for your customer. Tip number 80 is to look into marketing your books through TikTok. Now, I will confess this is something that I have zero experience with at the moment, but it is something I'm going to look into. There are other channels that show you how to market your book through TikTok. However, this is something that I think you should look into if you're looking to drive additional traffic to your books. Tip number 81 is to not pay for software unless you can afford it. There is no software out there that will automatically make you money. Saying that software can help you in certain niches where it is typically hard to create content or have content made. To see the software that I use in my publishing business, check out the description below. Tip number 82, if you've got an iPad, get PROCREATE and learn how to use it. It can do some great things for your books, especially your book covers. Tip 83, speaking of which, quick tip here for those of us doing coloring books and activity books. Take one of those images that you have inside of your coloring book or activity book, send it across to PROCREATE or Pixlr, color half of it in, and then use that for your front cover. For some reason, people like that. Tip 84, don't be afraid to cross niche if it makes sense. For example, maybe all the unicorn stuff out there is saturated to pieces, but did you look into things like unicorns and fairies combined, for example? People love these type of combo niches, especially when it comes to coloring books and activity books. Tip 85, if an opportunity comes about to be one of the first in a hot niche, you can grab it as soon as possible. You'll see what I mean soon. Tip 86 is to stop worrying about saturated niches and start worrying about where your book is likely to end up and what you need to do from there to get books to the front pages of Amazon for the niche that you're in. So for example, if you're looking at creating a toddler coloring book, which is obviously going to be very competitive, you need to do your niche research and then find out from there where your book is likely to end up, and then establish what you need to do in order to get that book ranked on the first page, which in most cases will be to drive more traffic to your book, which in most cases will be through Amazon ads, which you then need to decide how much money that is going to cost you. Tip 87 is to trick your friend, your partner, or family member into reviewing your book cover. Ask them what they think of your book cover without telling them that it's actually yours, and voila, you have honest feedback from a consumer. Tip 88, if you're doing coloring books or activity books, put some of the images from inside onto the back cover. 4 to 6 will do the job. Tip 89, speaking of back covers, take the time to work on them too, because some people do actually look at them. Tip number 90 is to get A+ content made for your best books. Now, I don't believe in creating A+ content for generic looking low content books. I think it's a waste of time. But if you have a book that you're really proud of, then make sure that you create some gorgeous A+ content for it as well. Okay, so tip number 90, and this is the big golden tip of all of them for this video. And that is for the first person and the first person only that comments book cover Raydog below, I will pay for your next book cover to be designed up to $25. Just write book cover Raydog and you've got to find the designer yourself and I'll hire them on your behalf. Tip number 91, if you're creating low content books with a black cover, use a slightly lighter shade of black. It looks better in my opinion. Tip number 92 is to stop using a trackpad to work with. Invest in a mouse and a mouse mat if you're on your laptop. Don't be a caveman, it's weird. Tip number 93, don't forget the negative targeting section in your ad campaigns. You might be spending money on keywords that are costing you money and not converting. By the way, you can get my free ads course from the description below for more on ads. Tip number 94 is to not neglect the listing aesthetics. So make your cover, your title, your description, your A+ content the very best that they can be. All these small changes and attention to detail will add up over time. I promise. Keep a very high standard for every inch of your work. Tip number 95 is to set goals to stay motivated and go through with tasks. A lot of us have the fear of hitting that publish button because we're worried that our books aren't good enough. Set those goals and you'll have that confidence to go through with it. Tip 96 is to target seasonal and evergreen niches. Do not waste mental energy trying to figure out which one is best because variety is best. Tip 97, so this isn't going to be a tip here, but if you've got to this point in the video and you want to comment down below what your favorite tip has been, or if you have a new tip that you can include into this long list of tips for other people, then make sure you comment that below. Tip 98, now if you're going to go the absolute free route here where you don't spend any money here and you want to create your own interiors, my suggestion here is that you create your interiors using Canva to the best of your ability and then start creating very simplistic book covers that have unique and funny quotes on them that people are likely to buy as gifts. So that's unique quotes. Don't steal other people's. Make sure you're the first of its kind. Make sure it's unique within your niche. Make it funny, make it edgy, make it cringy, make it rude, but be the first. If you're going to go the free route, that's the way you can do it. Tip 99 is to not obsess over one of your books just because you think it is good. Sometimes things just don't work out and people have a tendency to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on ad campaigns, look for crazy ways to promote their book through Pinterest and TikTok and all these other places when realistically customers just aren't feeling your book. Take the loss, move on to the next book and you'll have better chances of making sales, I promise you. Okay, so tip number 100, we finally got there, and you'd think if you've made it this far that there's going to be some mind-blowing tip to finish, but there isn't, and this is going to be the most generic tip ever, and that is to just try your best to enjoy the process of publishing. I know it's stressful, I know it takes time, I know it's hard work, and I know it feels like an absolute nightmare when you're not making sales. Now, if you're someone that is absolutely desperate for money and KDP is your go-to to try and create an income, then I think you're going to have an incredibly stressful time, and that's going to reflect in low quality books. You're going to rush books out there, you're not going to make any sales, and it's going to make your life an absolute nightmare. I think with something like publishing, you need to take your time, You need to find ways to enjoy it, find parts of it that you feel passionate about, publishing niches that you find interesting, and your results are going to be much, much better. If you do have the time, you do have the passion, you do have the money, then keep going with KDP because it can reward you in some incredible ways. In fact, I just had an email today, earlier on this morning, from someone that I spoke to who follows my videos, who's made $14,000 in the last 3 months, and they started publishing, I believe, midway through last year. So the opportunity is as strong as ever. Don't listen to all those saturated KDP saturated videos and all those things. KDP is dead. Ignore it. Go forward with publishing and you're going to have success, I can assure you. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'll see you in another one very soon.